I'm born myself after the fall of the Berlin Wall, after the end of the Cold War. And for me, the NATO is really that old-fashioned military alliance that has as an objective to support the US military industry rather than finding the conditions of developing peace around the world. The biggest issues is how we deal with inequalities, because we're calling Emmanuel Macron the president of the rich people because he has given them so many gifts over the last 5 years, and at the same time cutting on some social spending, that this is for us the key challenge of that election. We're proposing two main things to face the increase of prices. One is to cap prices of electricity, of oil, of commodities, and the second tool is to increase the minimum salary in France up to 1,400 euros. Back in 2017, Macron was pretending to be left-wing and at the same time right-wing. 5 years later, one thing that is sure is that he's right-wing and right-wing. He had a quite brutal way of ruling the country, basically. There's another thing that Emmanuel Macron is quite good at, is to pretend that he wants to get rid of the Growth and Stability Pact, for example, at the European level, pretending that he wants to change the European system, but the reality is really far from there. I think Putin is holding the only responsibility for this, and they should be prosecuted at international level. Of course, in the very short term, you should protect Ukraine as much as possible, ensure humanitarian corridors. But the question is how you put pressure on Putin. And I find that the European Commission is still a little bit weak in scaling up the level of sanctions to make them operational. So that's why I'm asking the Commission to actually firmly and officially ask European tax havens to publish a list of what Russian oligarchs own in tax havens. And if those tax havens are not doing it, to sanction them. I think one of the main lessons learned of that crisis is actually that we should be independent. And the best way to be independent is actually to develop renewable energies on the European territories. But in the meantime, we have to be careful on the consequences of a total ban and import. This is why I'm making the differences between oil and gas. When it comes to oil, there are clear alternatives of sources. When it comes to gas, it's different because the European Union is 40% dependent on gas. So as much as possible, we should try to lower and if possible to even end the import from gas, but we have to be realistic. We cannot ask people to pay 10 times the price of gas that they're currently paying. In other words, European people should not pay the price of this war that they haven't asked for. We're in the midst of an electoral campaign, so of course there are some people that want to instrumentalize that crisis for electoral purposes. I don't think none of us has to justify ourselves. Like, we've been condemning very strongly the attacks of Putin to Ukraine. We've always been on the side of international law. And if it is because we're saying that we should not further escalate the war that is currently taking place in Ukraine, if that is being pro-Putin, then I'm sorry, but I'll just let them talk and speak. I do think it's necessary because the best way to not escalate this war is not to have sort of a fight against bloc. And we've always been saying, and that's quite a tradition in France that is actually dated from the Général de Gaulle, of being what we call non-aligned. By being non-aligned, we just say that we don't follow blindly a bloc. For me, the NATO is that thing, that is dated back from before the 90s. I'm born myself after the fall of the Berlin Wall, after the end of the Cold War. And for me, the NATO is really that old-fashioned military alliance that has as an objective to support the US military industry rather than finding the conditions of developing peace around the world. Whether you agree or not with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, there's one thing that everyone can agree on, is that he has constant position. What has changed, though, in the context is that back in 2017, it was very difficult for our political family to claim ourselves as left people, because people would say, wait a minute, the left was governing with François Hollande, and he did everything but what the left should be doing. I think 5 years later now, it's clear that La France Insoumise, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, our movement is nowadays the only remaining left movement in France. And we have a clear ambition of rebuilding the left around our proposals. And that's that level of credibility, I think, that we're reaching now, that doesn't put us so much anymore into populist or into radical or whatsoever. You agree or not with us, but you know what we are going to do because we're providing the answers. Now we're in the position to be able to reach the second round of the election. I think it would be great for France, but it will also be great for the rest of the European Union that there's a strong left standing there and, kicking outside of the second round the far right. For my generation, this is also very meaningful because, I grew up with the far right so strong in France. There would be something being big that we actually managed to kick them out.